He is a refugee rights activist based in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the director of Afghanistan Migrants and Advice Support Organization. His organization has been involved in providing advice and support to those who are deported. Today, he will present a report from Kabul on current security situation and those recently deported or those recently returned. So, Mr. Abdul Ghafoor, welcome, and you can begin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the honor to be sharing my experience about the situation of those who have been deported to Afghanistan and the overall security situation in the country. I'm sure many of the speakers have already provided numbers and figures about the high number of casualties, the civilian casualties, the number of attacks that have been carried out all around Afghanistan and the capital, Kabul. What I will do is I will try to go more into practicality and maybe share some of the experiences of some of the returnees that I meet on a daily basis, the kind of fear that they face, the kind of trauma that they face post deportation to Afghanistan. When I was returned back to Afghanistan back in 2013, that was also the time that the security situation in the country was not too suitable. But today, in 2018, it is much worse than it was in 2013 or 14, for example. Until 2014, the only threat, for example, Afghanistan had was the Taliban. But after 2014 and after the existence of ISIS in the country, there's another very serious threat to all the civilians in Afghanistan, especially a minority group which are called the Hazaras. Kabul, in many cases, by many European states, have been proposed an alternative. For example, those who cannot go to Helmand or Ghazni, they can, go back to Kabul and live in Kabul or Mazar or Herat, for example. These are proposed as alternatives. But the situation in Kabul is as such that people are afraid to go to schools because the schools are being targeted. People are afraid to go to, for example, sport clubs because those are under attack. People cannot go to the gatherings. So it is no more the idea of being in a wrong place at a wrong time, because you are literally being targeted wherever you are. It doesn't matter either you're in a school or a club or anywhere you are. On the other hand, the western part of Kabul, for example, used to be one of the safest parts like 2 years ago. But today, the western part of Kabul is the most dangerous parts that people are afraid to go now. There are checkposts in every location that we go or travel. Muharram passed a few days ago. There was the Muharram procession, the Islamic year, the start of the Islamic year. And just before the 10th of Muharram, 26 suicide bombers were arrested by the NDS, by the Afghan security forces. 26 of them. Imagine if they were not arrested, what kind of chaos had they created in the capital, Kabul. So it's not about the number that how many were, for example, arrested. It is that it shows that how active they are inside the capital of Afghanistan, in the other provinces out of Afghanistan. So there is no idea or there is no justification to say that Kabul is a safe haven and then you can just dump as many people as you can. This is kind of the overall security situation. But when it comes to returnees particularly, it's much worse for them. Because the returnees that are forced to go back to Afghanistan, mostly in Kabul, they're from different groups. For example, some of them might have been in Afghanistan or Kabul before. So for them, it will be like kind of a little easier. But there are other groups of people who have never been to Afghanistan. I meet boys who don't know a single thing about the country and the Kabul. These are young boys that had left for Europe from, for example, Iran or from Pakistan, and suddenly they're sent to a war zone, a place that they hardly know anything about. So imagine if you're sent to a country that you don't know anything about, and you witness blasts, suicide attacks every single day. What kind of a situation or what kind of a trauma can you be going from? One of the recent incidents that happened was that there was an attack right in front of the hotel that the returnees are staying. And just a day before that, a charter flight was sent from Sweden and Austria back to Afghanistan. Just one day after that, there was this attack in front of the hotel, and the boys were terrified. I kept getting calls that, okay, Abdul, something has happened. What should we do? Where should we go? We don't have family. We don't have network. We don't have anyone in the country. So yeah, I can only feel the trauma that they can go through because I have gone through this. So this is the kind of trauma that the returnees face on a daily basis. And of course, if you don't have social network in places like Afghanistan and Kabul, your chances of survival is much slimmer than someone who has. If you don't have economic network, which is directly connected to social and security, if you don't have these things in Afghanistan, then survival, there's very least chance of survival or possibility to survive in a country like this. And also, not only the general security situation. For many of us, we only hear that, okay, this number of people were deported back to Afghanistan. But when I meet returnees and then when I hear their stories, it's way beyond that. Because some of these returnees, they cannot return back to their families because their families kind of disown them. In Afghanistan, the term deportation is not, or the people do not understand what the term deportation actually means. To them, you might have done something wrong or something criminal, that's why you have been deported. The people, for example, mostly in the rural areas, they can see towards you as someone that has rejected the religion, that's not following the culture, or you could be a spy, as easy as that. And this is something that I hear on daily basis when I hear returnees. So what happens is that even those who can go back to their families and provinces, they do not go because of the reasons that I just mentioned. The other very serious threat to young returnees, for example, recently and by the end of 2016, countries like Norway and Sweden started to send a large number of young Afghans. Some of them were too young that it's really difficult to figure out either they're minor or not, but some of them could be minor. So for them, the other bigger threat, aside from the security situation, is the exploitation that they can face. Because in Afghanistan, I don't know if it has been touched in this conference or not, we have this shameful act which is called Bachagazi, or using boys as sex slaves. And there have been some cases, some complaints from these young boys that have come to me and said that, okay, we were, wrongly approached at this party or at this place or at this occasion. And that was also the reason that, for example, our organization, we started a sort of a safe house, just these returnees a safe haven, or at least a place that they can, they do not feel this kind of threats, threats from the people, for example, the warlords or those who are in power. The other group of people who are at risk are, for example, the Christian converts. Afghanistan being a very religious country, do not easily accept those who change their religions. So the Christian converts, and there have been many cases of those who have been deported and who are just literally living and hiding until they could find their way out of the country. The other group of people we have is that the returnees, when they see failure, when they do not have their social network, that there is nothing done for the government point of view, because we all are aware that the Afghan government literally has no plan or no program or schedule or something that the returnees to survive, for example, that would encourage the returnees to stay in the country and do not think of remigrating. The other big issue is that the returnees go towards drug addiction. I am aware of at least 5 cases of returnees from various European countries who are living under this famous bridge, I would say, where most of those addicted to drugs are living. So these 5 returnees are currently living under that bridge, and they are addicted to drugs because they were disowned by the government, they were disowned by their own parents, and there was nothing done for them by the European states or the states that they were deported from. So this is the kind of issues that not everyone hears from the returnees. And the reason is because there is no monitoring about the situation of those who get deported. Because the only thing those deported to Afghanistan receive is, 2 weeks of accommodation at a hotel, and a little bit of financial assistance, which is also called a support package. And unfortunately, the support package, which used to be much easier to obtain, is now much more difficult. For example, today a returnee from Austria has to wait for 8 months until he is able to receive 500 euros, 700 euros. So we should ask the question, what should a returnee with empty pocket, with national and economic network, do for the 8 months or during the 8 months until they are able to receive the 500 euros? So the European states, instead of making things easier for the returnees, are making it much worse and much more difficult for the returnees. They could take the assistance, for example, in 1 or 2 months. Now they have to wait for, I know returnees who have waited for example, 1 year until they're able to receive, for example, $2,000 in case of, or $2,500 in case of Sweden. And every European country has their own support package and different amount of money for them. So the whole thing is that if we come to a conclusion about the situation of those deported and talk about the security situation, the non-availability network, the distrust or disbelief in the future of the current government, the discrimination that the particular group of ethnicity group face, if we come to a conclusion that these are the main causes that forces a large number of those deported to remigrate. What I do with my organization is that I try to stay in touch with the returnees as much as I can or as long as I can. And my experience is that a large number of them remigrate within a few months if it is possible, or if they have the money. If they don't, they wait for a chance, which means making a little bit of money to get out of the country as soon as they can. And that includes families also. There are many families who were deported back to Afghanistan and they're currently back in Iran, Turkey, or any of the other European countries. And it's not usually that they will go to the European country on the first try. But the main thing for them is to get out of Afghanistan as soon as they can. So this is a situation that the European states do not normally realize, or if they do, they don't care about this. Because if they do, this is a lose-lose situation for both the sides. For a returnee who has spent a large amount of money, who had put his life in danger just to go and seek protection from a European state, he is sent back to the same situation. And that's where I would say a situation worse than before. So the only option he has is to try the same dangerous journey again. And again, he will end up in one of these European countries. And on the other hand, the European states are also not kind of achieving their goal, which was to send them back to Afghanistan, or according to the Afghan government, send them back because they can help us build the country. I don't know how can they build the country when millions of people inside the country are jobless, millions of people. You have 1.5 million internally displaced persons, most of them because of the insecurity in the country. The camps outside Kabul are full. Go to the UNHCR reports, UNMR reports. I don't have to quote them. Just go and look at them. So if you cannot provide security to those inside the country, it doesn't make any sense to ask the European state to send more thousands of asylum seekers who have put their lives in danger to go and ask protection, find somewhere safe for themselves and for their children. There's no sense in making agreements to send them back to Afghanistan. To what? To nothing. Because there's nothing done by the government side from the Afghan government. The European states, instead of making things easier for returnees, are making it much more difficult, which puts the lives of the returnees at direct risk of self-harm. You know the case of this German boy who hanged himself at the hotel a month or two ago, where the returnees are living. The risk of going back on the same journey. So the whole idea of deportation to Afghanistan, looking at the current security situation, is not something that anyone can justify right now. Thank you very much. I think I have covered.
Thank you very much.
Points.
Thank you very much, Abdul Ghafoor, for briefing us on the situation in Kabul. And your organization, you're the director of Afghanistan Migrant Advice and Support Organization. I would like to ask you, what kind of advice and support do you exactly offer those who are deported or returned? And do you receive any kind of assistance from the government of Afghanistan or any other organization there?
Afghanistan Migrants Advice and Support Organization was established in February 2014. Before that, as soon as I was returned back to the country, I started working with returnees voluntarily. So what I used to do was to sit with them in, for example, coffee shops and restaurants. And I used to write about their stories, about the kind of treatments they have got during deportation, for example, inside the country of asylum, and what kind of issues they have inside Afghanistan. So it went on for almost 1 year. What we do with AMASO is, because we are a charity and very small organization, what I try to do, or what we try to do at AMASO, is to provide counseling and advice to those who are deported back to Afghanistan. So the advice or information or counseling consists of anything and everything, starting from accommodation, for example, the kind of mental health services in Afghanistan or in Kabul, the possibility of continuing education if possible, the possibility of job placement if possible. These are only options. And also connecting them back to their support groups in the European countries, for example, Sweden. Because most of these boys that have been deported, I know people who have been deported only with their slippers in their foot, you know. Their mobiles are taken, their computers are taken, they have nothing. They don't have a penny, for example, in their pocket. So my thing is to make life a little easier for the returnees as much as I can, with information, with connecting them back to their support groups, and doing whatever within my capacity. And as I also mentioned before, I also have a very small, which I call the safe house. And when I meet the returnees, I kind of interview them and then provide accommodation to those who are very vulnerable, you know, who are, for example, Christian converts, who are afraid of getting out of home, who are afraid of being identified. Very young boys, as I said, from Norway. I had cases of, they were too young to be honest with you, to be sent back to Afghanistan. They were minors, and I was afraid that they could be easily exploited. So I had, and very ill people, because we have had many cases of people who were severely ill, but again they were deported without any medical assistance or medical support. So that's what we normally do at AMASO.
Thank you. Let's take a few questions from the audience. Yes, please. Can you pass the mic here? Oh. Okay. She has the mic, so is it okay if she goes first, since she has the mic? So okay, you go afterwards.
It's on. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation, Abdul. I have a question for you. If you also you mentioned that also families with small children are deported, I think you said. And I wonder if you can see if they have if they face any special problems or risks different from let's say, civil young boys or men. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Of course, those with families have much bigger threats, I would say, than a single person. Because if a young boy, for example, or an adult, if something happens, they have the chance or possibility to get out of the particular place or find a solution for them. Or even if they are remigrating, it's much easier for them to get out of the country and compared to someone who are with families. And what the other thing with families are that there are most of the times children who are literally born in those European countries. I have had cases from Sweden and from Norway. The children were born in those countries, they were going to kindergarten, they were going to school. And Lisa and I remember one case of this family who were deported from Norway, and for one consecutive week, consecutively, these two children were crying from morning to night, and their only demand was that, okay, I want to go back to my school. I want to go back to kindergarten. And for their parents, it was not an easy thing to make them realize that they don't have this opportunity anymore, or they cannot go back to what they had, or the life, or the safe life that they had. So of course, they have much more issues than an adult or someone who has been deported alone.
Yes, here.
Okay. Yeah. Hello.
It's on.
It's on. Okay. I was wondering, do you know of any returnees coming from Afghanistan and going to Iran or Pakistan?
But there are many of them. You know, especially from the Scandinavians. And these are the young boys these are mostly young boys. They're between 18 to 20 and 22. Yes, there are many of them. There are many cases. And something that I forgot to mention, unfortunately, there are also cases of these young boys that were sent back to Afghanistan. They went back to Iran, and they were recruited for ISIS. So I know at least two cases of returnees from Norway who were recruited by the Iranian regime, and they went to Syria and they fought. One of them was unfortunately killed. The other one found the chance to come back to Afghanistan and Iran. So he's just going between Iran and Afghanistan, and he has tried his luck 2 times already to go to Turkey, but both times he was arrested and deported back to Afghanistan. So unfortunately, many of them, yeah, because they want to go back to their families. If they don't have families, they just want to get out of here.
We take one last question. It was Karen there. Do you have the mic? Okay.
Yeah, I have it. My question is, those people who are deported, is there any possibility for them to melt into the society, to not look different, not behave differently, and so on? When they've spent some years in, for example, Sweden, they are wearing other clothes and so on. Can they sort of disguise this once they come there?
Well, it's not a matter of melting in the society. So normally when you melt into a society, it starts, for example, when you go to school in a classroom, you know, you find friends around your place, and then that's how you melt, you know. If you go to another place, if you go for sports and everything. In case of these returnees, you know, they are mostly, because they are so traumatized, they find it very difficult to melt into the society. And their only tension is, for example, if you have a lot of issues, a lot of tension, their tension is their survival. The first thing they think about is what should they do, you know? The support package is given to them after 8 months. They don't have a penny in their pockets. So their first tension is how to find a way of survival. That's why they don't find much of a chance to get a part of the society. And then Afghanistan, and especially Kabul, is based on, you know, networks. You have your cousins, and that's how you grow your networks, cousins, friends, and everything. But for them, it's much more difficult. I cannot deny that it's impossible at all, because I know some of the returnees who have tried their best, and they have found their ways in a way. But it's much more difficult for the returnees, or for someone who has never been to a country, and then he should start from the zero and find his way out.
Seems like this will be the last question. Yeah.
Thank you for your information. Actually, I have a question, or I'm wondering, is there any organized reception center for returnees and deportees so they can get a kind of temporary protection, or is the only IOM arrange their residence in the hotel? So my question is the need of any reception center organized by the NGOs in Kabul.
Well, as I may have mentioned before, the only kind of accommodation returnees receive is just 2 weeks of accommodation at a hotel in the middle of Kabul city. And that hotel is for, they have contract with IAM, which you mentioned. So there is no other kind of accommodation or a shelter that would, that the returnees can go there. Is there a need? Yes. And in some cases, there is a need. For example, the cases of the boys that don't have a penny. Some of these boys, they call me and they're begging, to be honest with you. I feel bad to say that they beg me. They cry on the telephone. They say, Abdul, we don't have a penny. They call me when they're in the mosques. They're sleeping in the mosques. They're like, we are in the mosques. We are in the streets. Where should we go? Because after 2 weeks, they're just thrown out of the hotel. They don't have any chance to extend their stay or anything. So these are the situation. Now, I don't know what the practicality of this can be, how long they should be accommodated or not. But yes, a certain group of the returnees, they are in need of accommodation because they don't have anyone here, they don't know anyone here, and they will end up on the streets and the mosques or under the bridge and get addicted to drugs.
Thank you, Abdul, the refugees' rights activist, here talking with us online from